Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the Autism Parenting Summit. My name is Mary, and I'll be your host for this session, Navigating the Transition to Work. We're excited to welcome Brandi Timmons, who has over 23 years of experience in special education and is a board certified behavior analyst. She's the founder and education director of Incuentro LLC and also serves as an education director for the Spectrum Links Foundation. Brandy is a national speaker, a published contributor for the Autism Parenting Magazine, and the author of the Social Program, a social skills curriculum. Her work focuses on advancing social skills and helping individuals with autism successfully transition to the workforce. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Brandi Timmons.
Hey everyone, I'm excited to be here and to present to you all today. My name is Brandi Timmons. I am the Education Director of Incuentro, and we're going to be talking about transition to work and strategies for success today. So a little bit just about my work and why do I feel qualified to talk to you about this today. I have been in the education world for about 25 years now, and I have worked with kiddos of all ages, literally from 2 to 52 and older. But one of my passions has always been working with middle school and high school students, preparing them for life after high school, life as adults. And throughout my career, I have been able to create several different programs, very successful programs, worked with many kids, many families, and have gained a lot of experience during those roles. And so today, really what I want to share with you are three of the main things that I have learned throughout my career that I feel are beneficial basically for all families. And one of the things that I do want to mention today, a lot of what we're going to talk about comes from the public education world. However, all of these strategies can be adapted if you're homeschooling, if you have kids that are in private schools or charter schools or whatever setting your child is in. You can take these strategies and adapt them to fit those needs. And I'll try to be mindful of talking about that as well and how you can do those things in the different settings. But if I forget here and there, just think about it a little bit and realize that whatever we're discussing and whatever the strategy is, you can take that and adapt it in a way that it's going to work for you and for your family. Now, I also, one of my goals when I present is always to make sure that I have ideas for you that you're going to be able to take home and implement immediately. I'm not trying to present to you some big program that's going to be stressful for you and your family. I want these ideas to be things that you can take and use. I want them to be beneficial to you. So think about it in that way as well. If it sounds a little bit complicated, it's probably not as complicated as you think it might be. So I want to try to make that clear today. And hopefully you'll be able to take some of these strategies and use them and to your benefit for your child. So let's go ahead and jump in and we will get started with all of the information. So our main objectives today, number one, is I want you to understand the importance of data throughout the transition process. I am a behavior analyst. Data is my thing. I love knowing and having concrete ways of discussing behaviors, of discussing skills that students are learning. And for you as parents, data can be one of the greatest tools that you have. And so we're going to really dive into that. And I want you to understand how you can find data easily on your child and ways that you can take that data and share it with others who are invested in the success of your child after high school. And then we're also going to look at goals and assessments. So, what is the role and the purpose behind goals and assessments? How do you make sure that you have good goals and that you're using appropriate and beneficial assessments to inform those goals? And then finally, understanding why the transition process should begin early. This is one of the biggest mistakes that I see with a lot of families, and it's not intentional. A lot of times it is because, families just don't know. They don't understand the transition process well enough to understand what they can be doing in the early stages of their child's education before the mandated federal transition process begins. So we're going to talk about that, and hopefully you'll understand a couple of things that you can do. All right, so let's just start from the very beginning. What is transition planning? Maybe you are the parent of a very young child. Maybe your child is in preschool or early elementary, or they've just received a diagnosis, and you're kind of new to the world and trying to figure things out and what life is going to look like for your child moving forward. So, transition planning is a very structured process designed to ensure that all students with disabilities are prepared for life after high school. In the United States, there are federal mandates that state that you have to, as a school, address transition when a student turns age 16. Now, there are states that start that process before then. I happen to live in Texas, and Texas starts that process around age 14. If you live outside of the United States, there may not be mandates, but typically students are finished with high school around age 18. So that there's a time that you're going to have to start preparing and equipping them for what happens after high school. And at that time, they need to move into post-secondary education or vocational training, maybe employment or independent living, or even day programs or residential services. There's all different types of things that you need to be thinking about. But one of the main points to keep in mind is if your child is in a public school, there are services and programs that your child has access to now that they're not going to have access to when they turn 18. And so there's planning that needs to take place. Part of that is identifying your child's strengths and their interests, figuring out what are they going to be capable of doing after high school. On the flip side of that, it's also identifying the barriers. What are the things that you really need to be working on so that they can be successful in whatever environment you have planned for them post high school. Around that is creating an individualized education plan that is focused on transition. So typically you think of an IEP focused on academics, but we also need to think of that IEP being focused on transition to post-secondary life. And then connecting with resources. There are resources out there, but again, you may not know about them currently. There may be a lot of research that needs to take place. There are people that you can connect with who can provide resources for you. There are programs that you may want to access for your child that you may need to sign up for well in advance of when you're prepared to utilize those services. So there's a lot of learning. There is a lot of just knowledge that you're going to need to have to be prepared for your child to be successful after high school. And success is a broad term. That is, whatever goals you have set for your child, that can look different it's going to look different for every student. And then understanding legal rights and advocacy. A lot of things change when your child turns 18. So there's a lot of laws. There are a lot of rights that your student is going to have automatically the day that they turn 18, and you need to understand those things. There are many other trainings that you can attend, and that would cover all of these things in depth. And I encourage you to just start now. Start researching and learning as much as you can so that you can be prepared. So again, it is a process. It's a very structured process, and there are several of these categories and steps that you need to be educated on to ensure that your student is successful. All right, we're going to jump into the meat of what we're talking about today. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is data. Now, as an educator, as a behavior analyst, I recognized early in my career the importance of data. What I have seen over the years in transition planning meetings, whether that be at a school, with vocational rehab, with parents, one of the things that happens most frequently is that we have meetings and try to set goals and start planning for our kids, but we don't have enough concrete data to inform us where their strengths really are at the moment, what their barriers are, and how those can be worked on. And without that data, I talk to parents a lot. Transition really becomes a lot of guesswork. We do a lot of guessing on what do we think that they would be good at? What do we think they would like? What jobs do we think would be appropriate for them? And when we guess, what happens is we end up trying to train skills that maybe aren't the most beneficial for the students. We end up placing them in first-time jobs where, the first job that you have is always good because you're learning to work. But at some point, we need to be focusing the jobs that we place our students in on their strengths. So our kids are going to be more motivated. They're going to be happier when they're in a job that they enjoy and that they have skills and are interested in. So that's where data becomes really important. And there's two types of data. And this is just a general data lesson. There's quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative data is any information that can be reduced to a set of numbers. So basically, you think of grades and quizzes and tests, end of year exams, even attendance rates or questionnaires. All of those things can be reduced to a simple grade or a number grade or a percentage. So quantitative is really makes the most sense to most people. But then you have what's called qualitative data, and it's any information that's not easily reduced to numbers, but typically can be in some way. And these include things like parent observations, student surveys, therapist observations, essays, portfolios, student drawings, journaling, work task samples. All of those kinds of things are qualitative data. And both types of data are important. They're both very important for getting together the information that we need to create a clear picture of who our students are, what they're interested in, what motivates them, where their skill sets are, where they might need more training, or where they might need encouragement. Data is the glue that binds the entire transition planning process together. It provides three very important things. Number one, it provides you with objective information. Without data, it's somebody's opinion. You're guessing. You might think that something is true, but without actual data, you don't know that. Informed decisions. A lot of important decisions are made during the transition process in IEP meetings, in vocational rehab meetings, with parent meetings. They're decisions that are going to affect an individual's entire life. So we need to make informed decisions. We need that data to back up the decisions that we're making. And then good data also provides effective communication. It provides a common ground for discussions. So when you have data, a lot of times it's really difficult to argue if you have the data in front of you. So it provides that common ground for discussion, whether someone agrees with the data or not. If it's there, it's there. Now on this slide, you're going to see that I've highlighted the word good, and that's for a reason. Good data is important. So good, what that means is it's carefully collected, it's thought out, it's not haphazard, it has a purpose. You've set the objectives for collecting the data, you know what you're looking at or looking for, and it's collected and stored in a way that's easily accessible and understandable by everyone in the conversation. So good data provides evidence to support points of view. It enables everyone on the team to make informed decisions rather than purely emotional decisions. And it can also provide clarity and serve as a means to visualize thoughts and ideas. So not to say that you can't have a creative idea, not to say that you can't think something in a meeting, but if you think it and you're not really sure, go back and take some data and find out. If we think that a student has a particular skill, okay, well, we think we saw them doing this skill. Well, let's go back and let's test that. Let's get the data and let's give them an opportunity to show us, do they have the skill or do they not? Then we have the data to move forward. So just keep that in mind. And especially in the school system, that data is going to be used to create what's called a PLAF, which is your present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. For those of you that have been in an IEP meeting, you've seen a PLAF. The PLAF is basically a written narrative that takes data, pulls it all together, and tells the student's story. So it's going to explain and tell you right now, at the day of that meeting, at the day that that PLAF was created, what are the levels, the strengths and weaknesses of that student in the areas of academic achievement, which may include academic skills, reading, math, science, social studies, any of those academic areas, or functional performance. How are they with their self-help skills? What do their social skills look like? What do their behaviors look like? Their sensory and their motor skills, what are those needs going to be? So your PLAF is very important for everyone that's involved in planning to be able to look at the picture of that student so that you can move forward. And once you have that picture, then you're going to take that and you're going to do what we're going to talk about in the next slide. Now, for those of you that are not in the public school, you can create your own PLAF. PLAF is just a formal term that the schools use in those IEP meetings to talk about the picture of that student now. You can take this concept. You can pick a particular day. You can evaluate those levels, those strengths and weaknesses in all of these areas, and you can record those. It doesn't have to be completely in a written narrative format. It could be, you might keep a notebook every year where you record this type of data in bullet points. So you choose the areas that you're going to look at, and you record that data every year at the same time. Okay, so again, this can be adapted whether you're in the public schools or not, and it's super important for parents and those that are working with you to plan for your child's future to have this picture, because you're going to take this data and then We're going to use it. Although the present levels are the most important part of the IEP, it's also the section that's discussed the least, unfortunately. So I see this a lot in meetings. But you're going to take that data and we're going to write goals. Without goals, we don't know where we're headed. And then when you have goals, it's easier to take those and divide those into objectives or shorter term goals. So we're going to use that data and we're going to not just create goals, we're going to create SMART goals because we want to make sure that your child is making progress. You may be looking at a 14-year-old and you may be thinking, well, I've got 4 or 5 years until they graduate high school. But if you have goals for them and they're not there yet, you're able to break that down and evaluate whether or not they're going to achieve those goals when they need to have met them. And you can pivot and make changes and add supports and add trainings and do the things that you need to do to ensure that your child reaches their goals by the time that they're 18. So what is a SMART goal? It's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's relevant, and it's time bound. SMART goals are used by a lot of people in a lot of different areas. This is not just an educational term. I create goals for myself for different things that I do in my life. And it's important to be able to use these, and they're a very beneficial tool for you as parents, as educators, as caregivers. So what does specific mean? Just what it sounds like. The goal specifies the skill or the subject area. Details matter. So when you're writing a goal, you should include any support that the student might need as well. So looking at this table, we're looking at goals that aren't very specific. Students will get better at reading. And then a more specific goal would be when they're presented a text on their instructional level, they'll be able to use context clues to determine the meaning of unfamiliar words and reading materials. It's a very specific goal. That's very easy to assess and find out if a student is making progress on that. Same thing, look at the last one. Student will start working faster. This is a goal that I see worked on in vocational settings frequently. What does it mean student will start working faster? Without some criteria there, we don't know. So a more specific goal would be without prompting, a student will begin a task within 1 minute. Or perhaps we put a time frame around it. When given a filing task, student will complete the task within 30 minutes. So you're putting some specifics around that goal so that it's easier to assess whether or not it's been mastered. Measurable, we're going to talk about how often that needs to be measured. 4 out of 5 times, 8 out of 10 trials, attending to a task for 3 minutes with less than 4 directions. This is great, but be really careful when you set criteria to make sure that they make sense. The example that I've seen and I give all the time, if you're working on safely walking across the street, 90% isn't good enough. Your student needs to walk across the street safely 100% of the time. Same thing when you're looking at vocational goals. If it's something that they're doing with a job that may be a little bit dangerous or may be important for them to finish a task so that someone else can complete their job, then it's important to make sure that that criteria is set at a high enough rate that it makes sense. Achievable, be realistic. Let's look at our student and make sure that what we're setting for them is achievable. You may be thinking my child is 14 and we have until they're 18. That's 4 years. Well, look at their strengths. Look at their barriers. Even with that 4 years, is that realistic for them to achieve that goal? So very important there. And is it relevant? The goal should be unique to your student. Again, you're going to hear me talk about finding the strengths of our students. One of the most important things that we can do for our kids is helping them to identify their strengths. And we're going to talk about that when we move into assessments in just a moment. Make sure your goals are relevant to your child. Make sure that what you're wanting for them to achieve after high school is something that they're interested in. If they're not motivated, if you don't have buy-in from them, if this planning is not by them and for them, then it's not doing anyone any good. And then time bound. There should be a very specific time frame or a deadline around goals. So, do you want them to achieve the goal within 4 months? Do they need to achieve by the end of the year? Are you going to measure quarterly? All of those different things. This slide is a pretty common example of a SMART goal time framework. You can take this and use this to write just about any goal. It breaks it down and reminds you that there should be a time frame, the skill, the setting, the assessment that's going to be used, accuracy levels, and supports. So this is just a framework for you to use. If you Google SMART goals, you might find others that are easier for you. You might even find them that are in a fillable format. And now with programs like ChatGPT, you can write in what you want your child to achieve in just basic language and ask Chat to convert that into a SMART goal for you. So a really simple way for you to do that. And again, if your child's not in public school, if you don't have an IEP meeting, these are things that you can do at home. If you're homeschooling, if you're working with vocational programming, these are setting SMART goals are something that you can do outside of the public school system. And just a few questions to ask yourself. Are the goals clearly defined and appropriate for the student's level of ability? Are they worded positively with focus on what will be learned, not what they won't do? That's important. Can the goals realistically be achieved within the time frame? Do the goals outline the supports that are going to be provided? What are the accommodations that are needed? That's important for your child to understand and know as well. Do the goals move the student toward achieving long-term goals? And did the student, if able, give input on the goals? And the majority of kids are going to be able to give input in some way or format, which is super important. We'll talk about that again in a minute. So when you write goals and when you have an IEP plan, one of the things to ask yourself is, if I handed this over to another professional, could they pick it up and provide exactly the services that you intended to be provided? So once you have a PLAF and you've written those goals, if you handed it over to another caregiver, if you handed it to a teacher, to a vocational provider, would they be able to read the information, understand it, and implement what you intend to be implemented? So that's kind of a clear way for you to read through things and figure out if you're getting across clearly what you intended to get across in your documents. Okay, I know that's a lot of information really quickly. We're going to jump ahead to transition assessment. So did this a little backwards today, purposefully. So we started out with goals and the PLAF, because I want you to understand that's what you're hoping to work off of and have your student use moving through the transition process for them. But where are you getting all of that data? Where is it coming from? Transition assessment is one of, I think, one of those areas that has not been utilized effectively in a lot of areas. It's not something that a lot of teachers understand. Transition assessments have not been updated in a lot of ways in many years. I actually have a grant from the National Science Foundation, and I'm working on a new transition assessment that I'm really excited about. And so transition assessment is important to me. And I want you to understand how it can drive the IEP process, the PLAF, the goals, the whole transition processing. Okay. So there's a couple of things to just think about. Number one, we have to look at assessments that are age appropriate. And I'm going to explain to you in just a moment what some transition assessments look like, when they should be used, and what the purposes of a transition assessment are. It's to identify preferences and interest and needs and strengths. It's to inform that present levels of academic and functional performance. And it's to help you to set those post-secondary goals in both education and training, but also for employment and independent living. So transition assessment is crucial. It's crucial. It needs to happen with more intention in both educational settings and outside of educational settings. Parents need to understand what assessments are out there. You need to understand what assessments are being utilized with your child, and ask for more if you're not getting the data that you want from transition assessment. So with that being said, let's jump into the next few slides. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the types of transition assessments. So the first type is one that you might be kind of familiar with, and that's your interest and preference assessments. They are exactly what they sound like. They are to identify likes, dislikes, and what your child is motivated by. Many times these are paper and pencil questionnaires. Now they might be computer-based surveys. They might be interviews. I see a lot of picture-based surveys. So very important for early transition planning and to identify possible work-based learning opportunities. But we have to remember that the paper and pencil method of questionnaires and assessment, even the picture questions, are very limited. If you're showing someone a picture on a screen and or two pictures on a screen, and you ask them, what would you prefer to do? And one picture is a picture of working at let's say an animal rescue, and the other picture is working in an office setting. Well, your child might like animals, but they don't understand completely what all goes into that job, but they also like computer based jobs that they could do in an office. Well, they're going to pick the animal because they like dogs and they think they're cute. So it's a little bit difficult to really get a true picture of where their interests are. So that is a limitation of these types of assessments. Then you have aptitude and ability assessments. And these assessments, their purpose is to measure skills, measure abilities related to work, learning, or training. They're often standardized tests. They can be computer-based aptitude batteries, performance-based tasks. We're looking at academic skills. We're looking at vocational skills here. They can be used for career matching. They might be used for post-secondary education planning. So if a child is wanting to go to college, we might need to do aptitude and ability assessments. And then they're also used for identifying strengths and support needs. So again, same thing, tend to be pencil paper based, computer based, but you do see the caveat there that they can be performance based tasks. And we're going to jump into that with number 3. And here we have what are called functional or performance-based assessments. I have a big red box around this because I personally, as an educator, as a professional in the vocation training world, I feel like functional and performance-based assessments are the least understood, least utilized, but most effective assessments available to students. The purpose is to observe what the student can actually do in real or simulated environments. And the format is typically hands-on tasks. They're given situational assessments. They're given job sampling. This can occur in community-based instruction where the kids are taken to job sites and get to explore different tasks. Functional performance-based assessments are crucial for determining job readiness and accommodations, crucial for career matching, finding out what jobs are motivating to the students. What are they interested in? What do they really want to do? Post-secondary education and training. They're also used for identifying strengths and support needs, identifying barriers to success, assessing workplace social skills, all of the different things, all of the things that need to happen assessment wise can usually happen at one time in a functional performance-based assessment. At our company in person here in Texas, we actually use an assessment that has over 260 different tasks that the kids get to try. And they walk through that assessment. It's lengthy, it takes a long time. But once they have finished that assessment, we have a beautiful picture of what their skills are, what their strengths are, what their interests are. We have a picture of how do they handle non-preferred tasks versus preferred. How did they take constructive criticism from a supervisor? How do they interact with peers? What accommodations are they going to need? All of those things we are able to observe in real time in a simulated work environment. And then the parents get back a report that gives them this information that's going to inform everything that they do moving forward. So ask your schools, ask your vocational rehab services, ask whoever's working with your child on transition about functional performance-based assessments. There are 3 other types of assessments that are important to look at. Number 4 is independent living and daily living skills assessments. It's important to think about all of the other things rather than vocational skills that your child is going to need to know. These might come about in checklists or observations, parent-student interviews. They're important for identifying gaps and support needs. Typically for transition age youth 16 to 22, it's really important to know what their independent living skills are and where they might need more support. Social communication and workplace behavior assessments. These are also often observational rubrics. Role play scenarios can help with this. Rating scales. And these can take place in a classroom setting, out in a public setting, at home. Used to determine their employment readiness, maybe their workplace social skills. That's for our students with autism. Workplace social skills is one of the things that keeps them from being successful in the job sites, probably more than anything else. So it's often vital for them for you to understand where their barriers are and how you can provide support in those ways. And then finally, self-determination and self-advocacy assessments used to measure readiness to make choices, advocate, and manage adult responsibilities. These can be rating scales, student reflections, scenario-based assessments. I left this as number 6 because it's going to jump us right into the next slide. Self-determination and self-advocacy is important for our students to be able to and participate in the training, the transition to employment and post-secondary process. We want to make sure that their voices are included, that they get to tell us the things that they're interested and motivated by. We want them to tell us what their needs are in different situations as much as possible. And that's where self-determination and self-advocacy comes in. So let's change gears a little bit. Career development should always begin with self-awareness, and that includes self-determination and self-advocacy. Our students need to understand themselves. They need to understand their goals and the objectives that we have, that we're helping them to set. They need to have a voice in that. They need to be able to advocate for themselves to whatever extent possible. They need to be able to understand accommodations that they might need, how to ask for those. When they're placed in a job that they don't enjoy, that they're not motivated by, they need to have the ability to speak up and to talk about that. So career development needs to begin with this. And because of that, at the beginning of this presentation, I told you one of my objectives was for you to understand why we should start transition planning process early. And this is one of the main reasons why. So if you look at the slide, age 16 is typically when you have a transition IEP meeting, and that's high school. So high school, after that point, you start working on programming, work-based learning. You might have CTE, you might have internships. You have students that are going to go the traditional academic route. They may do 18 plus programs, and high school is going to lead to graduation, which leads to life after, whatever that looks like, post-secondary work, day programs, whatever's going to happen for those students. Well, when you get to high school and you start all that planning, those students need to be ready to provide their input. So we need to take a big leap backwards, and we need to start looking at middle school in 7th or 8th grade. Let's start doing career exploration and start talking about social and soft skills. But most importantly, let's start teaching self-advocacy and self-determination. Those students need to be learning about who they are as people. They need to learn that it's important for them to be able to tell us, what they want to do, quote, when they grow up. But they need to be able to do that in a realistic manner. We need to be able to have those conversations and help them to understand what jobs are available for them and help them learn to start making informed decisions. Start, stop the guessing, stop the choosing things and putting things in IEPs that aren't really realistic, and help the kids to understand what their goals are and how they can realistically reach those goals. So breaking that down, starting early is not about tracking. It's about providing a lot of opportunities for discovery. It's about building skills, both technical as well as independent living skills. It's about teaching self-advocacy and self-determination, and it's better data for transition planning moving forward. Self-advocacy skills, self-determination skills, independent living skills. These are all things that you can be working on at home. They're things that you can work with your students to learn and to improve, so that once we get to that transition planning meeting, they have the ability to provide their input. All right. I know that was a lot of information very quickly. Again, I hope that some of the things that we talked about have provided you a way to go back and really start thinking about, what does the process look like? For those of you that have kids that are younger, start thinking about these things now. This gives you information that you can go and do some research and learn more about what's coming. For those that of you that are in the middle of it, go back and start looking at your path. look at your goals, make sure that everything is aligned and that you have good data that's informing those. Remember, number one, no guessing. Transition should not be guesswork. If you have good data, you're able to make informed decisions. That IEP can be focused so that there's a graduation path that's going to include classes and electives that support your child reaching a career goal, a post-secondary goal, whatever that looks like for them. Everything on that graduation path should be leading up to them meeting those goals. And the number two, be realistic about career goals. Understand their strengths and their interests, as well as their barriers and their needs. So important. When you understand their barriers and their needs, it provides opportunities for them. It provides you information so that you can plan trainings, plan classes to fill those gaps. And through providing opportunities like work-based learning, like career exploration, you're helping the students to show their strengths and aptitude, to explore jobs that they may not be aware of, and that could lead to jobs that they're interested in. And then the time factor. I didn't jump into this today, but just keep in mind, for a lot of our students, the learning path can be a little lengthier than for a typical student. Sometimes when we are teaching and training skills, they may need more repetition. They may need more focus on a skill. We don't always have the luxury of changing goals multiple times. When you're accessing vocational services in school, when you're accessing classes that are leading towards post-secondary goals, we don't want to be focused on something that's not appropriate for the student. I've seen it happen. A student is placed in a job in high school. They keep that job for a couple of years, and then it doesn't lead them anywhere. And they end up having to start completely over with vocational training to get to the job that they're really interested in and really want to do. So the time factor for our students can be big. Having that data, using your goals, using transition assessment, and making sure that your student has the self-determination and self-advocacy skills to let you know what they're interested in and what's meaningful to them can eliminate some of the having to change goals multiple times. All right. The last thing that I want to just tell you about quickly is we have an app called Spectrum Links in the App Store. If you want more information like the information that I've given today, this is a community for parents and caregivers and experts to come together, share information, get to know one another, ask questions. We have themed courses, we have virtual meetings, different things that you can join in on just to continue your learning and knowledge of support for your students. So again, thank you for joining in today. Thank you for listening, and I hope that something I said today can be helpful to you. If you have questions for me, feel free to reach out. My email is on the screen, and my company websites are listed as well.
Thank you, Brandy, for that wonderful presentation. It's important for not only for neurodivergent kids, it could be to anyone, right? Especially for children to know, what do I want to be when I grow up, right? It's very important for us parents to start early because, as our children grows up, you would know, oh, she's good at drawing. Oh, she's good at a fashion designing or something like that, right? And it's important for us to invest in those interests for them to be able to achieve them as time goes by, right? Um,
Exactly.
I hope you're uh, able to accommodate. We do have a few questions coming from our parents, and
Sure.
some of them you've already gone through, but we want to make sure that we have answers directly from a very outspoken person and be able to address these questions as clearly as possible. So the first question is, many parents hear that transition planning should start early, but some of them are very overwhelmed. Some of them are working two, three jobs, or maybe they deal with their own businesses and having to deal with multiple children. What are one or two realistic things that families can do while their children are still in middle school to begin with the process without being overwhelmed?
Sure. I actually do another presentation a lot that's called Independence is a Process, where I go in depth on how to do exactly that. And one of the things that I always tell parents, one of the easiest ways to teach skills that are going to be important to your child after high school is making them do chores. Um,
Hmm.
when I do intake interviews with a lot of parents for some of our programs, I'll ask the students, "Do you have chores every week?" And they're like, no. And so having chores is one of those, and it doesn't have to be major. You don't have to have a chore list on the refrigerator with 100 different things. Um,
Hmm.
Having chores that they're responsible every week teaches them, number one, responsibility and accountability. But they also may be tasks. You can start including things as they get more proficient. Around the house that maybe they've never done before. A lot of our kids are not aware of everything that it takes to run a household, of everything that it takes for them to not just have a job, but to take care of themselves while having a job. So preparing their lunch.
Hmm.
Well, that's great, but how do you get the food in the refrigerator to prepare that lunch? You have to order,
Yeah.
you have to place an order. So really, and chores are something that you can start as soon as your kids are able to do something. So all you have to do is Google age appropriate chore list, and there's multiple ones out there. So any parent of any child at any age can start working on those skills.
Yeah, and it teaches independence, right?
It
Very
does.
good. So, also, you mentioned a lot about data, but as we all know, not all parents are very confident about reading data or very data driven. You've also mentioned that there are a lot of assessments that are given in school, but what kind of everyday observations are most helpful for our parents to bring during an IEP meeting in order for them to be able to transition those conversations?
Yeah, sure. So one of the misconceptions about collecting data, you hear it and you think of things that are really complicated. Data does not have to be complicated. Assessments do not have to be complicated. One of the examples I always give people is, let's say you want to know if your kids can tie their shoes. So how do you assess that? You ask them to tie their shoes. And you just
Hmm.
watch and see how many steps they do correctly, right? So you can do the same thing with anything, basically. Observation is an assessment. One of the things that is helpful to educators, many of our students, especially on the spectrum, may do one thing in one setting, but not do it in
Hmm.
another setting the same way or even at all. So if you know what they're working on at school, being able to let the instructors know, yes, they do this at home. No, they don't do this at home. Or they might do this at home, but it requires this prompt. So any information like that, especially if there are things that a student does do at home that they may not do at school, that's really important for educators, because let's say that at home a student can empty the dishwasher and put away all of the dishes every day without assistance.
Hmm.
well, we don't want our teachers having to teach, quote, teach that skill every day.
Mhm.
It might be just looking at the setting and the environment and what prompts are they using at home. So those types of things are really important for parents to share with educators.
Thank you for that. This one is very important, and I think this is a very heavy question. You know, when interest and preference assessments don't clearly point to the direction that the child will be aiming, because some of them would say, "I maybe like to groom a pet right now," but eventually they lose interest, right? A lot of kids would do that. How can parents help their child explore options without, locking them into a specific one too early?
Yeah. So again, this is one of the reasons why we want to start the transition process as early as possible. So starting in middle school is a great time to start letting your child try hobbies and different activities. Um, I've met a lot of parents that kind of go into hobbies and different things with the mindset of, I want them to sign up for this and I don't want them to quit because I don't want them to be a quitter.
Mhm,
Which there's a time and place for that. But if you think about it for our kids as exploration, maybe they
mhm,
sign up for art classes for 6 weeks and
mhm.
they're not really interested. Okay, let's move on. Let's go try something
Yeah.
else, and you as a parent, you're collecting that data and,
Mhm,
you're giving them the experience and, summer's a great time. Go find camps that might be available. If you're in a rural area where there aren't camps, there are quite a few online programs that offer camp-like experiences where they might not be in person, but they can at least learn about what's out there and figure out, maybe it's something that I might enjoy. And then one of the other things, when you are working with a really experienced vocational provider, someone who knows about jobs, a lot of times they have some really creative ideas. And so,
mhm,
all that data that you're collecting, you might not have one clear thing, or it might be something that they're interested in, and that job may not be available in your area. But those vocational providers may be able to help you to think of something that is similar to or in the same lane as that might fill that interest for that child.
Which leads me to the next question, because you have to break that. You notice as a parent that, okay, he lost interest in it, but
Mhm.
how do you still maintain protecting your child's confidence and their motivation in doing another task as they
Right.
grow up?
Yeah. So again, one of the things that assessment provides us is knowing where our students' skills and abilities are. So, as a parent, that is going to be part of your job, is making sure that what they're experiencing is not above their ability levels, right? And then you can back that up if you do have something that you know that they do enjoy, but maybe
Mhm,
you don't want them to be in that one thing all the time. Alternate, let
mhm.
them
Oh yeah.
have them do something that they're maybe not really interested in for 6 weeks, but then we get to go back and we get to do the Dungeons and Dragons class
Mm-mm.
for 6 weeks again, you know, and kind of balance all of that out. And again, don't throw out that Dungeons and Dragons is terrible and doesn't lead to a vocation. There may be something there, if they're the leader in that dungeon D&D group. Well, there's a skill. That's an important skill, that's telling you a lot. So those are the kinds of things, when I do intakes for students for our social skills groups, I always ask them about their hobbies and I ask them about what the things that they are good at, because it may not be obvious to us, but there may be some hidden talent there that we can key in on and use to lead to a career match.
You're truly right, because online games, especially those that are role playing games,
Mhm.
it builds character, it builds
It
social
does.
skills, right?
Yeah.
Even typing skills.
Yeah.
it's very important because when you start working in like a office setting, you need to be able to type, navigate the computer, and all that. So you're making a very good point on that.
Yeah, I had a friend who her teenage son was playing an online role play game and I kind of blew it off. And then one day he was explaining he was actually the leader of a whole group of people across the world that were playing together on a team and they were in first place in the world. And it was like,
Yes.
whoa, I didn't even know that was possible, you know? And so there were all of these skills that he was building and had no idea that that could even occur in the realm of a role play game.
Yeah, and the evolution of technology.
Yep.
A lot of kids right now would want to be able to express themselves. A lot of them would do TikToks, right? Or
Right.
even what do you call that when they live stream, right?
Yeah.
And nowadays those things pay money, right?
Yeah.
And we can
Well, it
take
takes a
away
lot
the
of
fact.
planning. Yep. A lot of
Yeah,
executive function skills. Yeah.
sure. Yeah, thank you. So I think we're going to the right direction because the next question is very similar to that because a lot of families would focus on academics, right? I want you
Right.
to be a doctor. I want you to be an engineer. I want you to be a lawyer, but not enough real life skills like social
Yep.
skills, communication, and all that. Which functional or daily living skills tend to have the biggest impact on future employment? And what are often overlooked by
Yeah.
parents?
So, my response to this question is going to be a little bit different in that it's ADLs in general. And what I mean by that, and particularly for the students that you just kind of mentioned, a lot of people don't know there's a whole lot of research out there about students with autism who do not have an IDD, an intellectual developmental disability. And those kids, they're actually upwards of 40 to 50% of the individuals that are diagnosed with autism fall in that category. So those kiddos are going to be cognitively able, academically average or above, and they're going to go to college. They're going to be able
Mhm,
to go get a degree. They are going to be able to do those things. But what happens is because they are academically capable, they don't get as many supports through school. So they're
mhm,
focused on academics and they're not in a life skills class. They're not getting that support, learning those daily living skills. Mom and dad may not be focused on that at home because they're doing well and they want them to continue academically. But what the
mhm,
research tells us is that those kiddos, once they hit 18, they actually regress
mhm,
in their daily living skills. So it's like they plateau and then they start to regress. So those students, it's the their abilities and daily living skills like social skills, like executive function skills, those skills are the biggest predictor of their success post-secondary. So if your
mhm,
student is one of those students, it's crucial for you to find a way to provide that training outside of school, to be focused on that at home. Make sure that they know all of those daily living skills. Give them that support socially. In our company where we provide vocational training, we find it's true. It's not that the kids can't do the work; it's that they don't have the social skills to stay on the job. That's what gets
that's
them
true.
fired, you know? So that there's not a specific social ADL, there's not a specific daily living. It's the concept of ADLs in general for that
Mhm.
particular group of kids that's more important than anything.
I truly agree with you on that. And lastly, from your experience, what is one mind shift that helps parents move from "Is my child ready?" to "How can I build readiness together over time?"
Yeah. Um, so from most of the parents that I meet and that I work with, the overwhelm gets in the way. It's that,
Mhm.
that thought of we have so much time. My kid's only 12 and I've got until they're 18. So, we're okay right now. It's getting rid of that thought and moving towards a proactive, what can I be doing every day? And it doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be a huge program that that you create. I tell people all the time, it's the little consistent things that you do that add up to the big major things that help your child be successful. So it's finding one little strategy that you can implement today and keep doing it, and then build on that as you go.
Thank you so much, Miss Brandy, for all the important lessons that we've learned today, all your insights, your experiences, and all the lessons that we received today. And we truly appreciate the valuable tools that you've given us and whatever we've learned today. We'll surely reach out to you, definitely, because I personally, as a parent, have learned so much today.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
uh, to everyone, of course, who are watching out there, thank you for joining us at the Autism Parenting Summit. And we're very glad that you could be here. And make sure to check out the Autism Parenting Summit agenda. We have many more inspiring presentations and interviews with individuals on the spectrum and, like Ms. Brandy, leading experts in the field. And we hope to see you in the next session. Thank you, Ms. Brandy. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.